So often Christians, children of God, are really focused on the New Testament. And that's good and proper, because the New Testament is all about Jesus and all about, our salvation and the church, which is good. But we got to be careful that we don't discount the Old Testament. I've known people would say, well, the Old Testament doesn't matter because that's just under the law and that's just about Israel. And to a certain extent, that's true. It is about Israel. It is all about the law. But Jesus is woven through the very first verse of the New Old Testament to the last verse of the New Testament. What God says is important. And there's ways that we can apply without following directly, the Old Testament law and things like that. And there's so much good advice in the Old Testament, whether it's in Psalms and Proverbs, that's full of stuff that we can easily relate to the New Testament. But other places too. And today's passage that really spoke to me was in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 32 and 33, and says this: "Be careful to do as the Lord your God has commanded you. You are not to turn aside to the right or to the left. Follow the whole instruction the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live prosperous and have a long life in the land you will possess." Now, obviously, when you look at the last part, we see that this is directly talking to the nation of Israel and what they're supposed to do when they get into the land. But the application applies to us also. Now, we may not get the land, like they're talking about here, but God's going to bless us in other ways if we follow what he says. And notice here it says, "Be careful to do as the Lord your God has commanded you." So we're supposed to, this has the idea we need to think about what we're doing. We need to do it on purpose. This isn't going to accidentally happen. We need to be careful to do as the Lord has commanded us. God's given us a direction for our lives. God gives us a vision for our lives. There's many commands in the New Testament. We have commands from, like, the 10 Commandments. It says be careful to do them. And then it says that we're not supposed to go to the left or to the right. You see, that's where we could get into a lot of trouble. We could say, okay, God's commanded me to do something, but I think I can improve this command. I can improve the results if I do things a little bit over here to the right, a little bit over to the left. I could take a little detour, a little sidetrack here, and everything will be okay. God says no. He's saying no, you don't do that here. Remember what Jesus said? That the path is narrow and not many find it. We need to stay on the path. We need to follow Jesus. We need to follow God on that path. We need to make sure we're not going to the right or to the left. We need to do it God's way, because let's face it, God knows better than us. We may think that, oh, this sounds good if we go over here for a while and do something over here. But God knows that that's not going to accomplish the goal. That could get us in trouble in the end. God knows that even though it doesn't seem quite right, God knows the exact best path. Think of it as walking through a minefield. Maybe you have to go this way a little bit, you have to go this way, but you have a certain path you have to follow to keep from getting blown up by the landmine. The shortest distance, the easiest way may be straight. But if you do it that way, if you just follow your instincts and go straight, you could easily get blown up. This is the same way with serving God and following God. We need to follow his path. It may seem a little windy. It may seem like it's taking the long route. It may seem like it's taking too long. But we do it God's way. And then it goes on to say, follow the whole instruction. Now here's another place that we can get messed up so easily, is that we only do part of what God tells us to do. There's some parts of God's commands that are easy. And maybe we do the easy part, the part that's comfortable for us, the part that's within our comfort zone. But then it gets a little more difficult. We get sidetracked. We lose focus, whatever. Something more interesting comes along. And we don't do the whole thing. We only do partially for what God called us to do. He's saying, no, this is not good. He says, if you do these things, if you stay on my path, if you're careful about your walk with me, staying on the path, not to the right, not to the left, doing the whole thing, guess what's going to happen? He's telling the nation of Israel that you're going to live and prosper and have a long life in the land. But what's God going to promise to us? He's promising us that we're going to have peace. That's the greatest blessing that God can give to us. He's going to bless us for serving him, for following him. And if we don't do things his way, some of these blessings aren't going to happen. You know, if we do things his way, he's going to give us peace. He's going to give us joy. We're going to have contentment. We're going to have satisfaction. Yes, it's true. He may bless us at times materially, but that's kind of just icing on the cake. The main blessings, the blessings that really change our lives, that really help us to live this life on this earth, is peace, is joy, is satisfaction, and is contentment. You know, we have to remember something as we look at a verse like this. When we're talking about obedience, partial obedience is actually disobedience. So when God says, follow my whole instruction, that's important. Partial obedience is disobedience. You know, we don't get credit for doing part of what God says. We get credit for doing all of what God says. And also remember this, that true obedience is doing what you're told, when you're told, with the right heart attitude. It's not about doing it whenever we feel like it or whenever we get around to it. Part of being careful to follow God's commands and God's instructions, doing them holy, staying on the path, not going to the right or left, is doing what we're told, following instructions exactly, and doing it when we are told, that's part of it, but also having that right heart attitude, not doing it because we think we have to, because we're being forced to. We do it because we love God, because we love people. We want to accomplish God's purpose for our lives through him, allowing him to use us. I would encourage you today to think about your life. Are you following God's commands? Are you careful to follow them? Are you staying on the path, not going to the right or the left? Are you doing everything that God has called you to do? If you are, that's wonderful. Praise God. And I'm sure that there's a peace that you don't even understand. But if you're not, confess to God. Ask God to help you to get back on the path, to follow him, and see if his promise doesn't come true in your life. If you've enjoyed this video, if it's encouraged you, if it's helped you, and maybe it's rebuked you some, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, may God bless you.